Hello, everybody. Welcome to Week 9 Prediction Amongst Friends, brought to you by Bud Light here in SEC Country Live. I'm your host, Hans Heiser. Appreciate you guys tuning in, being part of the program. Our team's going to be headed down to Jacksonville this week for the world's largest cocktail party. Georgia, number 3 in the country. We know about Florida. Sure, they've had a tough go at it this year, but hey, it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. We'll talk a lot more about that game. We'll get you all set for the week ahead SEC action. But first, let's go out to Skype. Let's bring in my partner, Alex Martin-Smith from Nashville, Tennessee, up there hanging out. Nashville, what's going on, brother? Good to see you, man.
Nothing much, Hans. Thanks for having me on for another week. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, man, always a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on with us. So last week, I believe I went 5-0, you go 4-1. And I get it, Alex. You know, you're behind. So you got to take some chances at this point of the season to kind of make up some ground. Maybe that has something to do with some of the games you're picking. But favorites go 5-0 last week. I go 5-0. You lose the Ole Miss game. Quarterback injury in that had a lot to do with that. Shea Patterson out for the year. The JUCO transfer going to be the quarterback for the rest of the year. Talk a little bit about that Ole Miss loss last week, Alex.
Yeah, you know, it's not just, losing Shea Patterson. This team is in bad shape in general. You've got the looming NCAA decision that's going to come down at some point this year, hopefully. And, you've got a coach who isn't necessarily going to be back next year and a quarterback now in Shea Patterson who might seriously be considering his options, I would think, as far as potentially leaving the program if there were more severe sanctions to come down. So it's not a good time to be a Rebels fan. You at least before you got the chance to watch Shea throw the football, and now you don't really have much going for you. So if I was an Ole Miss fan, I'd probably just spend my Saturdays doing something else for the rest of the year here.
That was it just looked like on paper an opportunity, especially some of the shortcomings LSU had early on in the season, that maybe it was going to be a bump in the road from them, a road game, obviously a much better team at home. But, hey, give Coach O, give them credit. And Matt Canada's offense, early on, stagnant would be an understatement, Alex, but they just continue to put more and more wrinkles in it. And what can you say about Darius Geis? He's still running. Yeah,
I like what they've been doing, and Geis is coming along nicely where he was hurt, and we didn't know if he was 100%, and all of a sudden he's got a 279-yard game, which, you got to kind of temper that a little bit because it was against Ole Miss. But I think it's a great sign, and I think there is a little more faith on Coach O's part on that Canada offense to allow them to have some time to develop. There was some frustration early in the season, and now I think it's sort of coming into its own. And look no further than Danny Etling had not had 3 touchdowns or more in a single game in 4 years almost against a Power 5 opponent, and he pulled out 3 against Ole Miss. So I think that's a great sign. I think they're definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, they still got A&M and of course the battle with Alabama coming up here shortly. So a lot of football left for LSU. You and I were on the same side of the other 4 games last week. Alabama rolls over Tennessee. Everybody saw that coming. Mississippi State, they get the win over Kentucky in dominating fashion. This game was close early on, 17-7. They pull away in the second half. We'll start off our show today breaking down the big game they have against Texas A&M here in just a sec. But Auburn, they run all over Arkansas. Missouri finally gets in the win column, ending a 5-game losing streak, and hopefully they can continue that with a non-conference game this week going up to UConn. What is an SEC school, Alex, doing going on the road to UConn at the end of October?
Some of the scheduling stuff is a little quirky, especially because the SEC saves a lot of those games, for the end of the season. Even look at Bama and how they traditionally play an FCS school before Auburn at the end of the year, and Missouri at UConn in late October. I don't think anybody ever thought that was going to be a game involving an SEC team, but here we are, and I think it's going to be a little fun in stores. I think both teams are going to be able to move the ball. And Drew Lock should continue sort of this hot streak that he's been on. I think 13 passing touchdowns over the past 3 games. It'll be fun.
He's looked good. I had to do a double check when I saw that for the first time. I was like, wait a second, they're going to UConn? So we'll come back. We'll break this down. Mississippi State, Texas A&M. Guys, hit us up on Facebook Live on your page. We'll read your comments. But do want to remind you, our SEC Country Live team, they will be down in Jacksonville. And don't forget to join Bud Light for a pregame tailgate before Florida, Georgia. Prizes, food, swag, beer, and more for guests over 21. It's going to be located at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds, just steps from the stadium. This will be a tailgate you will not want to miss, and plenty of coming up on that football game at the end of our program. Be sure to hit us up on Facebook Live. We'll get it started today, Alex, with a very interesting matchup. Mississippi State, we talked about their performance. I thought Fitzgerald was amazing last week in the second half against Kentucky. Boy, Kentucky looked flat. More about them in just a moment. Mississippi State, man, sitting there at 5-2. Favorites on the road. I saw this. I don't know how they're favored. I'll give you my take on a second on this. Alex, how do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, I do like A&M at home. I'm just as confused as you as to why the Aggies were not a favorite in this game. Mississippi State, they've been a fairly easy read this year for the most part. They've been really good against teams sort of on their level. And then when they've gone up against a couple of the bigger dogs in Auburn and Georgia, they've completely collapsed. And that's because they're a run-centric offense. When they have to pass to catch up, things don't go terribly well. So the question is, is A&M a team that is superior to Mississippi State or not? And you can look back last year, they came into that game, A&M did number 4 in the country, according to the playoff poll. And they gave up an 80-yard touchdown on the first play. They gave up 35 points, and they lost. And Nick Fitzgerald had almost 400 yards. But I think there's something a little different about the A&M team this year, especially on defense, because while their offense has been trying to figure stuff out with Mond, it's that defense that really kind of stymied Alabama, held them to 27, and then did a great job at the Swamp to help them win that game. So I do think A&M kind of their defense gives them an edge against Fitzgerald and Mississippi State.
And the one thing about watching Mississippi State this year, and it started with Georgia, obviously, these teams that they play with very athletic defenses that make them one-dimensional. We've talked about it every single week. Last week, Kentucky, they weren't able to stop the run. They really got exposed as far as stopping the run last week. Mississippi State had their way. Now here comes this Texas A&M, who to me, outside of Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn, they're in that 1B conversation for defense, especially their front seven. 28 sacks, leads the nation. You have to think that their game plan, Chavis and company, is going to be to make Fitzgerald throw the ball. And I just don't know, you throw the 28 sacks on there, if he's going to have the time to make plays down the field. We know how hard it is to play on the road at College Station. I think this could be a very lopsided victory for Texas A&M. I don't get the spread, but usually when I don't get the spread in a game like this, it usually works out the other way. What does Mississippi State have to do is what I should say to win this game on the road?
Yeah, Nick Fitzgerald, he's a special quarterback. And, he has a little bit of Tebow in him where he can really kind of have that physical running style. He's got a cannon of an arm that he doesn't necessarily always, do the right thing with. But, he is a star player. And I think that always gives Mississippi State a chance. But A&M just has, like you mentioned, they've got that pass rush. They've got those athletes on defense who, if they play well, they're able to bottle up Fitzgerald. And it's been proved several times that if you do bottle up Fitzgerald, Mississippi State is pretty much dead in the water. And I don't like that sort of one-dimensionality. And I think Texas A&M does have that athleticism on defense, and they've got a promising enough offense, some go-to weapons, where I think this is going to be a problem for Mississippi State, even with their great quarterback play. I'm
going to go with Texas A&M in this one. Kevin Sumlin, we've talked about the Alabama effect. Which basically the way the schedule works out, Alex, is going to be the second half of your schedule, the SEC West. And in years past, he's really struggled there. Well, he kind of mixed it up this year. They took a lot of time off last week to rest their players. At this point, I guess you try anything that's different from what you've been doing in the past that hasn't worked. So a rested Texas A&M team, see how they'll handle this, the second half of the season. Kevin Sumlin changing his approach. We'll see how it plays out on Saturday. But with everything we've gone into, I like Texas A&M in this game. And I wouldn't be surprised. I thought it was crazy, Alex, early in the year when people were calling for his job. if Kevin Sumlin wins a couple of these games that he's lost in years past, let's say they win 9 games at the end of the year, and he ends up telling Texas A&M, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. Could you see it working out like that in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's in a unique situation where in January, you had all these clauses in his contract that prevented either side from really making a move. And in January, a lot of that stuff went out the window. So not only could A&M send him away, but he could sort of say, hey, I don't really want to be here anymore at the end of this season. And I think that could definitely be the route that this thing goes. I'm not convinced that this is going to end well for A&M this year. There's too much history of this team collapsing. But I do think the defense is a good sign, and I do think someone might do enough where he can sort of have the call at the end of the year and say, okay, you know what, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home, or I'm going out somewhere, going out west, going somewhere. You guys aren't going to fire me before that happens. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch. You're right.
I agree, and you don't forget he's had suitors in the National Football League as well. So just many more opportunities for Coach Sumlin if he does decide to do it. So you and I are both on A&M. Moving along, second game, and we're going to get to your Georgia, Florida. All these comments on our board right now are Georgia, Florida, Alabama stuff. We're going to get to them. Everybody wants to talk about the coaching. We got some breaking news on Tennessee football we're going to share with you in just a second. Quickly moving along, Vanderbilt, South Carolina. Hey, if things shake out, Alex, down at the cocktail party and somehow Florida ends up stealing a victory from Georgia, I don't see it happen, but crazy things have happened down there. South Carolina beats Vanderbilt. They control their own destiny. It's amazing the job that Coach Muschamp has done in his second year there in Columbia.
Yeah, it would really open up the race and make things interesting if Florida can pull off that upset. And South Carolina is a team that has been very consistent defensively. I do not like their offensive ceiling and the way that they've played offensively since Deebo Samuel went out in September. I don't see the firepower there. I think Jake Bentley is a really solid quarterback, but his play has not crossed into that sort of spectacular area for very long stretches of time. So while that would be fun for USC fans to sort of be back in the race, I don't think South Carolina is going to end up in Atlanta. I just don't think they're going to be able to score points in those important games.
No, I agree with you 100%. This is a game, though, if they win this, which they are expected to, and you and I are both taking them in this game, they're 6-2. They're 6-2. They're looking at a decent bowl game, and this is part, Alex, of the process. I mean, he inherited a complete mess of the the previous regime, if you will, and the only way you're going to get to where you need to be is slow, incrementally getting better year by year, and they seem to be on the right path. 6-2 if they win this game. Who knows? Maybe an Outback Bowl, something like that. I think if you were to offer that to Gamecock fans before the season, they probably would have taken it.
Yeah, definitely. And really, it's a bummer about Deebo Samuel because you look at the players, the non-quarterbacks who are the most important players of their football teams this year, and you could argue that he was up there at number one for them. You don't have to look further than the way he changed the game at Missouri with 2 touchdowns in less than a minute to give them a lead in an eventual blowout. I mean, he was just a special player, and he made that offense go. And so it is a bummer to see them in position to have a good record, go to a nice bowl game, and he can't be a part of that because I think he would have taken them to that next level where you're sitting there right now and saying, oh, maybe they could make it to Atlanta. So that's a big difference. He's a great player, and I know South Carolina fans are tired of talking about him being out, but that is still just such a huge, it's had such a big impact on the SEC season this fall.
Yeah, you knew it when it happened. I mean, you knew it when it happened. You saw how special he was, how important he was to the team, and credit to that team and the coaching staff. They continue to find ways to win. They muck it up. It's hardly ever pretty with South Carolina, but they've been finding ways to win. Quickly, Alex, what are you seeing about this Vanderbilt team? They started out hot, the big win at home over Kansas State. They've lost 4 in a row. Now, granted, it's been against some elite SEC competition for the most part, but this is a team that cannot get off the field defensively. There's been some regression on offense. Here they find themselves on the road again with their backs up against the wall. What does Coach Mason, what does he have to tell his team to kind of save this season, if you will, here at the midway point?
Yeah, I think, all you have to do is look back at the first 3 games of the season and how well they played. They knocked off, I think, number 19 Kansas State at home, and it was a great start for them. And then their passing offense was working. The defense was playing really solid football. And then Alabama happened, and we've sort of seen the fallout from that over the past few weeks. So I think what Derek just has to tell his team is, hey, look back at what we accomplished in September. And I know that football team is still in there somewhere. Not to get too corny, but you've got a bunch of opponents coming up where you do match up well. And I think that players just have to look at those 3 games and say, listen, we can pass the ball, we can play good defense. And this weekend is a good opportunity to prove what they can do, because South Carolina isn't great at moving the ball. It gives Vanderbilt's defense a chance to sort of rebound a little bit. And then on the flip side, Vandy's offense has showed enough promise where, yeah, maybe they can move the ball and score on South Carolina's tough defense. So I see a pretty even matchup this week, but I do like sort of a comeback game for Vandy here.
Yeah, we're both on South Carolina at home in this one. If they get the win, they improve to 6-2. Do want to remind you, if you're heading down to Jacksonville, we got a great taillight going on down there, and it's brought to you by Bud Light. Don't forget to swing by, join Bud Light for a pregame tailgate before the Georgia-Florida game. Prizes, food, swag, and beer guests. You got to be over 21. It's located at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds, steps away from the stadium. This is going to be a tailgate you do not want to miss. Brought to you by Bud Light. All right, moving along, Alex. Tennessee, Kentucky. Now, we did our picks. I was on Tennessee. You were on Kentucky. Breaking news hours before we go on air. John Kelly, freshman linebacker, last night, 10:46, pulled over, misdemeanor possession of marijuana. They're going to be suspended for the game on Saturday. He is as important as a player as there is for that team. You saw Kentucky last week, the way that they could not stop Mississippi State from running the football. John Kelly was going to maybe go for 150, 200 yards, you thought, at least given every opportunity to on Saturday. It looks like he won't be able to play. How does this affect the game for Tennessee?
Yeah, this seems like a little bit of rock bottom for Tennessee right now. You've got your star player, probably going to be out for a little bit. Everybody wants the coach fired. The new quarterback can't get into the end zone. And you're a 5-point underdog or whatever it is now to Kentucky, which in any season Tennessee should pretty much never be an underdog to Kentucky, no matter the circumstances, and especially not a Kentucky team that just lost by 38 points or whatever it was at Mississippi State. So I would sit there as a Tennessee fan and really just kind of wonder how much worse it can get. And now that John Kelly's out, he was sort of that bright spot. You say, well, at least we got John. At least he can put up some yards for us. And now there's really not a lot going for that program. And I think this is a tough matchup at Kentucky this weekend.
Yeah, they were fired up for the Florida game. They'll be fired up again. Any chance you get as a Kentucky football fan to beat either Florida, Tennessee, or Georgia on your home field when they're down, you're going to take advantage of it. Got some funny text. Deepak writes in, he says, legalize it, let the boys play. That's a whole nother conversation. But here's the deal. It's 10:46 on a school night, Alex. You're riding around in a car with a busted headlight, no proof of insurance, and marijuana in the car. I mean, John Kelly's a guy who's going to play on Sundays, I think. This isn't the kind of stuff that I mean, whether it's legal or illegal, that's another conversation, but you know that what's at stake here as far as your eligibility, being able to be there for your teammates. This is just really foolish on his part and really selfish, in my opinion. I don't have a problem with what he was doing, but you got to think about your coach, who in this case is really have some issues, and you got to think about your teammates, and he really let these guys down with getting caught with this the other night.
Yeah, you got to think outside of the conversation of, is it fair that marijuana is illegal? Should it be legal? I mean, the fact of the matter is that the law is in place. He understands the law, as you said, and still decided to break it and sort of put his own career and his teammates' future at risk. And it really is indicative of a program that your star player just doesn't care enough not to put himself in that situation. It's a bummer for everybody involved, but it's not a surprise, really, for the Tennessee program for something like this to happen. It just seems like they're kind of lost right now. And I think when your star player goes and has something like this happen to him, goes and does this, I think that does tie into, okay, is a team bought in? Does anyone care if you finish with 6 wins or not? Does anybody care? And the answer right now just seems like it's just a big no. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, they're going through the motions up there in Knoxville, and I think it's $600,000 less every game that Butch Jones plays, or coaches in rather, for the buyout. So it's the inevitable. He's not going to be the head coach next year. This is just another, just another blemish on what has been a just devastating year for the Tennessee Volunteers. I like Kentucky in this game at home. You like Kentucky in this game at home as well. Let's move along. Game 4 on our schedule tonight. We got Georgia, Florida coming up in just a second. Arkansas and Ole Miss. What can you say about the Hogs' defense that hasn't already been said? They cannot stop anybody. Brett Bielema can't run the football. The quarterback, I think Austin Allen could possibly be back this week. Haven't really got a confirmation on that yet. Ole Miss, we know they're going with the JUCO transfer. What do you see out of this one, Alex?
Yeah, this is one of the more depressing games of the season. Not just that we can't watch Shea Patterson throw the football around, but the fact that Austin Allen, he might play. I'm guessing he probably won't. You're looking at a pair of quarterbacks that have thrown a combined 97 passes in their college careers that are going to be playing for two of the worst teams in the conference at a noon kickoff on SEC Network. I mean, it really doesn't get less exciting, I don't think, than this game this weekend. So I'm sure fans of both sides will be curious to tune in, but I can't imagine there are too many people outside of those towns and those fan bases that really give a rip at all. Because I mean, if you're tuning in, what are you there to watch? Who are you there to watch? There's really nothing that's pulling me in right now.
Right. I mean, I guess if you're Arkansas, you're trying to find a way to become bowl eligible. If you're Ole Miss, maybe just see what this junior college transfer's got, because he might be your quarterback next year if Shea Patterson transfers. But, I mean, if you're Matt Luke, how do you keep these guys dialed in week after week after week, knowing that the end game is no bowl game?
I'm not so convinced that that's going to be as hard of a job as people might have thought. They've done a good job of fighting thus far. Yes, they did have Shea Patterson, who was sort of their leader and captain and all of the above. But this was a lot of guys that knew coming in that, listen, we're not going to a bowl game. We're not going to do anything of really serious consequence this season outside of maybe a big upset or two. And I think whatever he got them to do to buy in at the beginning of the year, he's able to kind of keep that consistent and say, listen, there's still a bunch of opportunities for you to play SEC football and play it well. And you got a chance this week against Arkansas. This could be your SEC win. This could be your last big moment of the season potentially. He's not going to say it like that, but this is a big moment for the team. And I think they understand that. Just because Shea's out, they know they still have a shot, because Arkansas is right down with them, toward the bottom of that barrel in the SEC West. And they're going to look at this game as one that they can definitely win.
If you're Ole Miss and you lose this game, you got a legitimate excuse. You know what they're playing for? Nothing. Starting quarterback out. So you got a little bit. If you're Arkansas and you lose this game to a backup quarterback, to a team not really playing for anything, a coach that's already on the hot seat, these fans are looking for a reason to burn couches and go crazy and do all this. You're giving them every reason to. I don't want to call it a must-win for Arkansas, but it's about as close as you can get to a must-win. They lose this, it's devastating to that football program and Coach Bielema's future, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like, this game certainly is important for Arkansas, but it's like whatever fate they were going to have this year seems like it's already been sealed. You look at Bielema, you look at their roster and the way they've been playing. It just seems like there's not a lot for them to gain, moving forward here. I don't think they're going to win many games. This might be their last win in conference play this season. Very well could be. So I think it's a must-win to keep kind of the haters off their back for another week and keep it from getting too horrible. But as you said, this is an opportunity to really, really hit the bottom here for Arkansas, because losing to Ole Miss when they don't have their best player, when they haven't really been that good with their best player for most of the season, like this would be really, really horrible for the Arkansas program. So I hope for their sake they're able to use that running game with Whaley and Williams and sort of be able to put up enough points to get out of there cleanly and not stress out too much. I do like Arkansas to pull it off this Saturday.
You like Arkansas on the road. I'm going to take Ole Miss at home. I have just not seen anything to give me any optimism about Arkansas football this year. If Austin Allen plays, maybe it's a different conversation, but give me Ole Miss at home. All right, real quick before we get to our final game, Georgia, Florida, we're going to spend plenty of time on it. We got all your comments coming into Facebook Live. I'll be sure to get to those. Going to tell you about a tailgate that our folks at Bud Light have going on down there. But UConn, Missouri, we talked about it a little bit. A little curious, playing a non-conference game on the road this time of year. Missouri looking for its second win in a row. I guess when they hit the reset button a couple weeks ago, prior to last week's big win against Idaho, that was the right time to do it because you had a couple lesser opponents that you were going to be double-digit favorites in. The good news, the one last week you were at home, a little bit different challenge this week going on the road. It's one thing to win at home. I think this is important for Missouri's confidence to know that they can go on the road and get a victory as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. And for people that haven't been paying attention, Missouri's offense has really come to life. Put up 34 against Kentucky, I think 28 against Georgia, including a bunch of big Drew Lock passes in the first half of that game when it was competitive. Then they just destroyed Idaho, they're not a terrible football team. They ran through them and threw the ball all over the place against Idaho. So I think it's safe to say that the offense for Missouri is clicking again. Drew Lock looks like one of the conference's best passers again. So that's a good sign. And the question for them is always defense. And I do think UConn has a strong enough offense to make this a shootout. And that's just, if you're sitting there watching as a fan, I think that's what you're hoping for is at least a fun game. And I think that's what you're going to get in stores. I think Missouri's going to win it, but I think it's going to be sort of a high scoring affair. And Bryant Shereffs, who's the quarterback for the Huskies, just put up 372 last weekend. So that's sort of indicative of what both these offenses might be able to do. Maybe 700, 800 passing yards on Saturday.
Yeah, he continues to push it around, man. Missouri putting up points each and every week. They'll come home after this game. They got a couple of home games, I believe Florida, Tennessee back-to-back. So maybe a little bit of momentum. Crazier things have happened. We know about Tennessee and Florida struggles. Maybe Missouri can creep up on one of them at home. And I don't want to say save this season, but end things on a good note.
Yeah, things are at least trending in a better direction for them and for Coach Barry Odom, to the point where I can envision a scenario where things go well enough over the last month and change here for him to keep his job. I think they need to pull off an upset or two, but they are finally moving in that positive direction.
All right, Alex, let's go. Let's have some fun, man. Georgia-Florida week. People have been hitting us up on Facebook all day long wanting to talk about this game. We saved at the end. We wanted to have an opportunity to talk about it at length. I thought when Kirby Smart came to Georgia, a guy who played at Georgia, who understands the rivalry, and he can go, he did the most Nick Saban thing ever this week, Alex. I don't know if you heard this comment from him Monday, where he basically said, it's just another game. We prepare for them like we would any other week. It's totally something Nick Saban would say. He played in 4 of these things. Don't forget, his freshman year, Alex, was the 95 game where they hung 52 on Georgia in Athens. He lost 52-17 his freshman year, 47-7 his sophomore year. They end up beating Spurrier and the Gators his junior year, and his senior year they get beat 38-7 again. All 3 of those Gator wins when he was a player were games that Spurrier ran the score up on. So he doesn't forget that. And this is a Florida team. We know their shortcomings. We know they're down. Look, I'm telling you right now, Alex, if Kirby Smart has a chance to put 50 on Florida on Saturday, he's going to do it. There's not a doubt in my mind that he has not forgotten about what happened to him as a player and how one-sided this rivalry has become lately.
Yeah, of course. I think like Nick, he tries to play things off a little bit or kind of play it down. And I thought it was kind of funny because some of these Florida players have been feeding the fire a little bit with their comments this week when you probably just kind of want to stay quiet and hope Georgia comes in and falls on its face instead of giving them a reason to be angry other than the fact that they've lost 3 in a row against Florida. So I think definitely Kirby still harnesses those kind of old feelings of hatred toward his rival. And if he gets that opportunity, which this year it seems like he certainly might with this great team that he has against Florida's questionable squad, yeah, of course, he can run up the score just like Nick would, sort of subtly, maybe put in some backups, throw the ball around a little bit and keep the offense rolling. I could see that. Maybe, I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I think Florida's going to make it a tougher game than that. But yes, Kirby certainly still has those feelings of anger somewhere deep inside their Hans.
Well, the good news for Florida is You got Tony coming back. Looks like Cleveland's going to be back as well. So that gives you a couple playmakers, to go along with that running game as well. But look, Franks, he was the guy who got the start opening week against Michigan. He gets pulled. We know all the different quarterbacks pushing in and out. He's the only option right now, assuming Malik Zaire, I guess, is just cannot grasp the offense in practice because we haven't seen him back on the field since then. But I have not seen any growth. For a couple weeks, I guess the point of conversation, Alex, was, hey, let's open up the playbook. Let's see what Franks can do if we really let the reins up. But we haven't seen that yet, and I wonder if that's more in line with what his capabilities or lack thereof are, the fact that he didn't have Cleveland, he didn't have Tony, and now this week he's going to have a full arsenal. And who knows, maybe this is the week that Malik Zaire comes in for a series or two. So those are the things, to me, I think Florida's going to have to do on offense to keep up with Georgia in this game.
Yeah, I thought so too. Like maybe this is the week that we see Zaire. There's clearly something. Maybe it's grasping the playbook, like you said, something that's been keeping him off the field because Franks has just not improved. This offense has not progressed. I understand that it's hard when you lose so many scholarship players at the beginning of the year. You lose your biggest playmaker in Antonio Callaway. You lose Jordan Scarlett. That's hard. But you also want to see some improvement, and that's where it's been so frustrating for Florida. And you're looking at an offense that barely gets over 180 passing yards a game. Franks has not been able to sort of open up the defense at all. And allow his runners room to breathe for the most part. It's been really, really frustrating. I think Florida fans are, they should feel kind of upset that even though we did lose these guys at the beginning of the year, we haven't gotten any big plays, outside of that, crazy Hail Mary against Tennessee. The two big plays against Kentucky were because Kentucky forgot to guard the receivers, stuff like that. And, that's crazy stuff. That's a little outside of normal. But, when we're looking for explosive plays, that's what they've been missing. And with Franks behind there, and he hasn't shown that improvement, I think that's what they're going to continue to miss moving forward unless there's some kind of drastic change with the way that they're approaching Franks and the game plan and whatever. So maybe this is the week of Zaire, Hans, where he's going to get a chance to just get in there, just like they threw him like a sacrificial lamb to the Wolves against Michigan in week 1. Maybe they'll just throw him in there and see what he can do. I don't know.
Going back a couple weeks ago, Georgia offensively just shy of 700 yards in the game against Missouri. You felt like that was the game that you were going to see Jake Fromm get an opportunity to air it out, and he really did. I thought Missouri's defense helped a lot with it there, but I think most Georgia fans were looking to see what kind of quarterback they had. They knew the leader they had. There's growth that was expected with that. But what jumped out to me, it wasn't Fromm, it was the playmakers he had on the outside. I know Wims could play, but I thought that Riley really was outstanding. They used a couple different tight ends that really jumped out to me. These were guys that were kind of lost in the shuffle because of that dominant running game that Georgia has. I thought it was more showing what kind of playmakers they have, where you really didn't see any of that in the first 6 games that Georgia played outside of a couple plays against Notre Dame.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because the passing offense was dormant for so long, and you look back though to Fromm's first start against Notre Dame, and the fact that he had to throw the ball, whatever it was, 26, 29 times, somewhere in there, in a way that he did not have to do in subsequent games. And now we know now that Notre Dame is a pretty good football team, so that makes sense. But I really loved the game plan that Georgia put in that week for his first start, surrounding him with those playmakers like you're talking about, getting the ball out of his hand quick. They're letting him throw it deep, but they make it an easy read, kind of an easy decision to make, and let his talent take over. And that's what we saw, a little more developed version of that against Missouri, where, okay, Missouri's scoring touchdowns. We got to move the ball through the air a little bit. And they're picking their spots, finding him open receivers, and just the whole setup was great. So I have a lot of confidence in that offensive game plan and what kind of positions they put Fromm in, because he has so many weapons around him. I think the coaching staff does a really great job of using those weapons, knowing when to allow Fromm to make decisions, when not to, and getting the ball in the hands of the guys who are going to win the game for him. And I have a lot of confidence because of that in what they can do, not only this week, but eventually if they meet big bad, Alabama and Atlanta. That I think that's going to be a fun one. I don't think that's going to be a Crimson Tide blowout like it usually is.
It definitely seems like that's the path we're on. You know, ever since Florida had those back-to-back interceptions against Michigan and took them back to the house, they've done nothing. I mean, they really haven't. They cannot put points on the board, and I'm looking at this game, and I'm saying it's a rivalry. Something has to happen in order for... I don't see any way Florida's going to score in this football game. Maybe a turnover, maybe a pick six here, maybe a special teams play, but maybe 14 points, maybe 17 points. But I have to think Georgia's going to put up at least 28. At the end of the day, even if this is a close football game, I don't see it being anything less than 10 points. I just don't see it. I think it's more inclined for Georgia to go and blow them out than it is for it to be a close game. I just don't see it, Alex.
The hard thing about playing Georgia is the things that they're really good at, it's easy to translate those things, week to week. Like, their defense is playing at mostly an elite level, and that's something that carries over well. Their running game, they just have so much talent there, even outside of Chubb and Michelle. There's a lot of guys that can run the ball well and give you those speed plays, those big bursts. So, let's say you can move the ball in their defense, you can shut down their running game somehow, but then they still got Jake Fromm, who's young. He's a first-year player, but he's got one of the better arms in the conference. He's been one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the league. And so it's like, even if you get those first two phases out, you still got to outsling this freshman who's been a ton of fun to watch. So a lot needs to go right. I don't think Florida has those answers. And you're right. I don't think this is going to be close at the end of this one. I see a tough battle in the first half here. I think Florida's going to come out with a lot of emotion. They're going to play hard, but they're just going to get worn down after a while. They can't move the ball, and they're not going to be able to stop Michelle and Chubb in the second half. So I do see a big win for Georgia.
Yeah, you and I are both on Georgia. It's just going to be interesting to see. We know they got a lot of senior leaderships, the two running backs, bunch of guys on defense, but this is a team that really hasn't faced much adversity this year. I mean, the road win on Notre Dame was big, but I'm talking about being down in a game late where you have to make a play, you have to rely on your quarterback. I don't see it happening in this game, but at some point this year there's going to be some adversity. How does that team respond? Could be at Auburn, could be in the SEC championship. It's going to happen, but one thing Kirby's done is he's coached these guys up, and the leaders have done a great job in the locker room, and this team continues to improve. And if there's a weakness, like in the Missouri game, they got exposed over the top a couple times. They had a week off to address it. They're going to fix it. They're going to continue to get better. He's done an outstanding job with them so far. As far as Florida goes, things are heading in the opposite direction. We'll see how the rest of their season shakes out. But Georgia big on Saturday. I want to remind you, if you're going down there, we got a tailgate going on by our sponsors, Bud Light. Be sure to go check it out. It is going to be in the Jacksonville Fairgrounds, just steps from the stadium. It's going to be a tailgate you don't want to miss. Join Bud Light for a pregame tailgate before the Florida-Georgia game. They're going to have prizes, food, swag, beer, and guests. Just remember, you got to be 21 or over to participate. Alex, it's been a lot of fun, brother. I appreciate you coming on with me as always. Have a great rest of your week, a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you next week. All right, brother?
All right. Thanks, Hans. I appreciate it, man. I'll see you next week.
All right, man. Be good. Don't knock your cup of whatever you were drinking over when you stand up.
It's cocktail week, man. It's
cocktail week. In honor of cocktail week, we're going to get it going. Thanks to everybody for tuning in here on Facebook Live. Thanks to everybody behind the glass. Outstanding job as always. And thank you to our sponsors, Bud Light. Again, this has been an episode of Prediction Amongst Friends brought to you by Bud Light. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care.